employee perspective. And frankly, from a customer perspective too, and we'll talk about that a lot in a minute. And from that, we came up with this kind of concept that says there are really three things here that are important from an organizational standpoint. We see businesses as decentralized now, and that's more and more the case because of the capability to connect and work from wherever you are, from an iPad or an iPhone or whatever. And so decentralization, alignment, in other words, transparency and openness can create a culture that keeps all your people aligned. Why is Zappos such an interesting business? Because they have amazing customer service, absolutely amazing customer service. And the reason, how they get there is they have all of their people in the business aligned to the fact that the customer is the #1 priority, no matter what. If they have to lose money on something to solve the problem, whatever it takes, they solve your problem 100% of the time. So they ingrain this in all their employees from top to bottom. Everybody, you could walk in there, and I've visited them, you could walk in their facility, you could talk to anybody, you could talk to the janitor, you can talk to the president, you can talk to, the customer, that's where their focus is, alignment. And then transparency, and transparency actually goes right back to this idea that knowledge is the key here. Information is what we're trying to deal with, and so information has to be opened up in a way that we can involve more and more and more people across your business, because it takes us out of the box that we originally tried to put people in, and out of that knowledge box that we try to keep people in by opening things up. And there's issues and risk around that. I understand that, and we can talk about some of those. But in the end, all of these things really tie together to lead to what we now see as the important metric here. What are people really looking for? Employees and customers and partners, they really want to be engaged. And the way they get engaged is through this whole concept, being valued and respected, working with purpose, and living in an environment of trust. And in an online environment, which is part of where we deal all the time, trust is actually the most fragile thing. It's the most important thing, because I have to deal with people that I've never met face to face. I don't have all those verbal clues, and so it's a really complicated thing. But at the same time, it's the most fragile, because one little break in that, and I've written you off. Because it is so difficult, that tenuous link without the physical connection leads to engagement. So if you look, and this is where we really started to talk of technology, and then I'll get into the CRM piece of it, I promise. Technology's really started to change dramatically too. And we think of these major platform shifts. So think back, or maybe to what stories people told you about mainframes and what this looked like. So from a mainframe days in business, really was a very small number of people involved in the technology. Millions of users maybe, thousands of applications, because again, a big overhead, very controlled, very few people involved in it from the perspective of how the technology functioned. So then we moved to the client server era, and probably, if there are any CIOs in the room, that was probably like the worst thing that ever happened from a CIO perspective, because we went from a place that was completely controlled to something that was totally out of control, and nobody could possibly police it. I remember 1995, I was working for a company called MRO. IBM owns them now, and I was doing a project in New York City for Con Ed. They hired me to come in and implement, we had this maintenance technology, maintenance management system. And they hired me to come in, and I met with their IT organization. Their CIO goes, okay, we want you to go out and spend time for the next 2 weeks with all these divisions that are involved. And the project is to replace these 4 systems with this system of yours, and we think this could be really interesting. So, go talk to them, figure out what they really need, and come back. So I went out for 2 weeks, and I interviewed people, and I understood their business and really built the whole business case. And I went back and I said, this is the requirements, we can totally meet your requirements, but there is one problem. You're not replacing 4 systems. You're replacing 32 systems. He had no idea. Uncontrolled, right? Hundreds of millions of users. Definitely PCs got out to everybody, to a lot more people. And tens of thousands of apps, because there's a lot more apps, desktop, a lot more productivity. And now we add the internet, so what happens? Well, now we move to this idea of billions of users We see millions of applications, but we have another thing. We have trillions of things, so it's not just about connecting people anymore. We've also added all these smart devices. And on top of that, we have these 4 major pillars, and this is what I mentioned before. Mobile, cloud, big data, which I'll call smart data because it's not useful unless it is, and social. So these 4 things really start to push this transformation in business that we see. You know, I said social change, economics, and technology come together to really start to push business in a different way. So now we start to see what a business should look like, and actually, when I first started looking at this, I used to talk about this a lot. I get really excited. Business can be social, and I was talking to a group of salespeople, and they said, and we can make sales social, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And they, you know, hands, like, sales is always social. And yeah, it is. Sales was always very social. It's the #1 social activity in a business, right? But what we lost was the capability to know the individual. We went through this period of time when we were still using that paradigm of control, process, automation, and the explosion of the Walmarts of the world. Not that there's anything wrong with Walmart, but it's not a business that is built on the idea that it can be individualized to you. It's built on the idea that they have a whole bunch of stuff that's really cheap and you can go get it there, right? Now we go to a model that says mom and pop businesses are back, but at scale. Because now I have the capability, and this is where we really start to think about this from a customer perspective. I have the capability as a business to know millions of people on an individual basis. I have the capability to know what you're thinking about, what you're talking about, what you feel, what you want, because you're telling me. You're telling me every day. Well, maybe not all of you, but a lot of you are. And you're transparent. You're online. You're posting things. You're sharing things. You're talking to people. You're giving permission to see this information. So I now have the capability to build a business that's social. That's social in a scalable, hugely scalable way, and it's individualized. I have a new kind of influence that I have to deal with that's positive and negative. On the positive side, I have the capability to build word-of-mouth advertising, and word-of-mouth marketing, which we've always known as the strongest kind of marketing, but I have a capability to build that at a huge scale, and to get information to help me know when I'm building an influencer and when I'm not, or even know who's going to be an influencer before they become an influencer. And then this idea of experience. So now I can build an experience that feels comfortable like what it used to feel like. And I remember, my mom, when I was little, would take me to the little local grocery store, and we walk in the door, and it was like that old TV show Cheers. Everybody would say, "Hey, how you?" Call your name, and they knew who you were, and they knew how old you were, and they knew you liked whatever candy, whatever. And they saved stuff for you. They knew the kind of meat that you wanted from the butcher. They knew the kind of produce you liked, and they saved things. I mean, it was individualized. It was this capability to really provide service at a completely different level, a customer experience. And now we have that same capability, and we have people that are starting to expect this. So this is the last kind of high-level thing, and then we'll get a lot into CRM. But after we defined this and we started to really pull this idea around social business together, we decided to list all the processes inside the business that we could see social having a dramatic impact on. And we started out with really simple ones because some are really obvious. You have this capability to build the enterprise social network, which can really provide that connectivity, and I can tell you case study after case study of really interesting things. In Salesforce terms, that's kind of chatter on steroids. So it's chatter but connected to other things, and perhaps connected to the customer communities now, like you can do with chatter communities. And then we saw customer service, because customers were starting to expect to get service in different ways. But as we looked at this, we started to realize that there's so many systems and processes inside the business that we can start to impact. And we have this new kind of analytics we call socialytics that takes social data, applies sociology, behavioral modeling. And actually, that was one of my first college degrees, was sociology. I always thought it was useless until like the last 5 years, and now I talk about it a lot. Well, I'm a sociologist too. And And we have this capability to understand people's behavior in this large context and apply that to all these processes, so internally and externally. And this is not that creepy sort of thing. I always have to say this because I can see some people in the back go like, you know, like things about me. It's all based on permission. So there are plenty of things, and believe me, even if I actually was funny, my mom, who's like 86 now, talked about she's never been online, and she said, like, there's nothing about me online. You know nothing about me online. Well, let me Google you and just see. And the first hit was her name and address, and the businesses they owned, and where her mortgage was, and where, like, yeah, there's plenty of information online. But anyway, so this is the list of these processes, internal to external, customer, employee, and then kind of moving across this into the partner community. And so with that kind of backdrop, this, excuse me, I'm still fighting some weird allergy attack from the last trip out west, I think. We do this survey twice a year, and it's 700 companies, North America focused. And over the last 3.5 years, when we started this, we asked this question, you know, why are you doing these social activities in your business? It's all focused on around the enterprise. And this is funny, this is this year's, but let me tell you a little bit about the, well, thank you, look at that.
Grateful.
So does come back. Yeah, I appreciate that. See, that's connection. So we asked this question over the last 3 years. So the trend of this is really interesting. So this one I'll talk about, but the first time we asked the question, what do you think we got? We got, like, the first half of the chart was all about brand. It was all about broadcasting. It was all about advertising. It was all about marketing. And if you think about it, 3 years ago, that's what people were thinking about. They were talking social media. They weren't talking social business at all. They were talking media. They were talking about broadcast. Then last year, completely changed. And last year, the top 5 things, and I highlighted some of them. These were the top 5 last year. Communicate with internal colleagues, share knowledge, contribute ideas, acquire knowledge, and ask questions. So they were all about the collaborative enterprise. And if you think about it, that's a logical shift. Because what do? We had marketing was in charge. Then we saw this capability to start to pull people together and connect and perhaps increase productivity because of it. So it was about collaboration. And then this year, I was really happy to see, because now we start to see this mature a little. Now we see gather feedback on company product or service, respond to customer partner inquiries, competitors are doing it, and communicate with partners and suppliers. So all of a sudden, the conversation that was about marketing, then it was about us, now it's about them, it's about everybody. So now we see companies that are really starting to connect all of these things together, and they're starting to see real business benefit from it. So in the enterprise today, I said we have these systems. I was as much a part of this as any, building systems that could automate and build structure and stability. And guess what? When we survey information workers, so people that work with information on a regular basis, they spend 80% of their time working around that system. Up to 80% of their time not using the system that you think automates your business. The problem is that this rigid thing does what it's supposed to do, and an awful lot of your work today doesn't. It's not rigid anymore. In fact, what are you supposed to do? Well, you have to make decisions, and we have to do that in the context of people. So now we start to see systems shift, because in the past, and I didn't put this slide in, but I have this really great slide that talks about the history of analytics, and it starts out, with some reports that are static and are generated, and I made a lot of money writing those reports in the early 90s, I guess, but it was all locked away, it was all static, it was all predictable. It didn't really answer questions, it just gave you a certain amount of data. Then we went through this analytics phase where we had analysts trained to do things for you. So you had a question, you'd ask them, and they'd provide it to you. And usually it was, 2 months after the incident, and you get the data and you could see what happened and why it didn't work, but you couldn't fix it because it happened 2 months ago. Then we move to this era that we're in now, where we start to see the capability and the need to put things in context. So what do I need? I have to have systems that not only do and we still need these, they automate the process, have to have that. Then on top of that, I need a system that gets information to me along with people, so relationships, at the right time in the context of my work. And if I could do that, what would happen? Then I could actually make information-based decisions about all the things that I need to do that would normally operate outside of this system. So this is actually a systematic way to capture all of that work that we're doing that really isn't in the original kind of systems of transaction. And today, they aren't connected, and that's a part of the problem. We're moving to a place where we get a new kind of platform that pushes us into systems that really start to capture all this. But today, it doesn't happen all together. So, with that in mind, we have CRM systems, and a lot of us have, made our living around this, and it's been very important to us, and it is really important to businesses. And frankly, I see a lot of businesses that are re-implementing or that are implementing the rest of it, or, it's still very much in demand and very important. So, we have this sales system, and we have marketing, and we, of course, very important, we have support. And those are, the key pieces of the CRM system. And then the rest of the business, it's not connected, it's in other things, right? So all these other pieces that are important to the business. So we have customer facing. And we built the system this way. It's CRM, and then there's everything else, right? That's the way it works. Out here and here. You talk to people, they talk about their customer facing people. They talk about, how they have to get their customer facing people more engaged. They have, deal with their customers in the system better. They need relationship management systems, right? So that sounds really good, but what happens with this is to think about this. What's the quickest way to create an issue with a customer? Well, this is a new iPhone 5, and I ordered it because I'm really obsessive about technology and gadgets particularly. And it had to be to me on the day it was released. I pre-ordered it, I made sure that if this had come in on the Saturday and not the Friday, I'd have been really unhappy. That wouldn't have really meant, the whole world would have continued to operate, I know, but for me, the experience would have been horrible. And who impacted that decision? It could have been the FedEx driver who, didn't find my house. It could have been the loading dock person. It could have been, who knows? But the point is that customer experience, customer facing, it's not all out here. Engage customers in an ongoing conversation, build a community, this word of mouth advertising, thinking about providing service when, where, and how the customer, interacting with the customer where they want you to. The systems aren't designed to do that today, at least not completely. And in fact, it creates a lot of problems if you start to think about this. And I have gotten in really great online discussions with with CEOs and COOs and people that are in operations that go, we can't afford to do this. And I say that you have to do it in a way that sustains your business, but you can't afford not to do it. Because that's the problem. It's a cute picture, but it's the truth. Today, and in 30 minutes is probably ridiculous, right? Today, I waited 5 minutes and you didn't show up. Actually, today it took 36 seconds for your page to load and I was already somewhere else because it took too long. Or you forced me in the IVR system and the second time I had to hit 1, I hung up and went to your competitor. Because I'm ADD anyway, but we're all ADD as a population anymore because of this fact of the need to interact and interact rapidly, and the fact that our expectations have shifted dramatically in what we expect. This comedian Louis C.K. is hilarious. I don't know if you've heard this. I think he does this routine about how people are just ridiculous about their expectations. He goes like, you get on the airplane, you sit down, and you boot up your computer and they take off and you start to surf the internet online. You're on the plane and you're like, this thing's really slow. Like, this is just driving me crazy. It's almost unusable. I can't believe it. He goes, listen, you know, you're at 35,000 feet going 500 miles an hour, and you're able to get on the internet. How amazing is that? And I think our expectations have just gotten skewed and driven in a different direction. So if you're a business, the problem is that as a business, I've got to start to deal with that in a way that keeps my customers. So I really have to change this. Now, you know, that's still important. You know, we have to do all those things. But the difference is, this is so simple, but I had fun building the slide anyway. It's so simple. But the point is that there's no such thing as customer-facing and non-customer-facing. And this has got to be the one fundamental thing we have to change when we think about the system. Because the systems are all tied together and matter from a customer perspective. They care just as much about shipping as they do about your salespeople. Maybe more. You know, if you get the right story and the company engages with you and tells you the truth, are you okay? You're okay with that. Like if I ordered that phone and they immediately came back to me and they said, I'm sorry, they're back ordered and you won't get yours until Monday morning. I'd have been upset because I really wanted it on Friday, but I could have lived until Monday if they'd been honest with me. Now that's the issue. And that sounds good, but what does it take systematically to do that? It's not easy. So, you know, customer experience. And we start to kick this around a lot. I'll be up all night after I drink all these diet sodas. We start to think about this a lot. So we've got to get past the mentality of the front line. That's the first thing. And, you know, how do we tie the voice of the customer? You know, we were talking a little bit before we got here, Ami and I were talking a little bit about chatter and enterprise social networks and those kinds of things. And, you know, the thing about the way we think of companies today is we still think of these siloed things, even in what I just said. Chatter we thought of as a way for the sales force to collaborate, and that's really mostly where it's used today. I mean, it can do other things, but a lot of companies think of it, oh, that's the way the sales force is. And then they get, you know, some other collaboration. They bring Yammer in to do something else, and they bring SocialCast in to do something else, and, you know, now you have all these orphan social network systems that aren't connected. And what we really need is to tie all the things together. So, you know, if you had a customer community, and this is one of the best ways for delivering support today and to get engagement from customers is to build a customer community. So you have this customer community, and that customer community, they talk about your product, they talk about your company, they talk about your brand, they share ways to do things that are better, so they give you tips and tricks, they give you knowledge, all sorts of information. And what do? You put it outside your firewall in a customer community, and you assign a customer manager, and what happens? The customer manager keeps all that stuff going. And maybe if you're smart, you harvest the information and pull it back into your knowledge base. But what don't you do? You don't tie it together with that internal social network that you just deployed. So what product designer wouldn't like to be able to listen to what the customer says about their products? And not through a focus group, but in real time. And from a huge cross-section of the population, not 5 people in a room. So, you know, voice of the customer starts to tie back into your whole company, and then that really does start to make all your people customer-facing because they have the capability to listen to the customer and respond to the customer if they happen to have the right answer. And then they start to think of this in a complete experience because it really is a complete experience. We got together a group of analysts to think about customer experience and talk about it, and pretty soon we realized that just having the CRM analyst and my commerce analyst and my collaboration analyst in the room wasn't enough. I needed the supply chain analyst, and I needed the business process automation analyst, and I had to have the database analyst, because guess what? One of the hardest things to do was actually know who the customer was. It's a huge deal, and customer experience goes way beyond the boundaries that we think it is. And then, you know, influence. I mentioned influence before, but this is the most beautiful and most dangerous thing that we have. Is the idea that I can create an influencer that can either sway huge parts of the population by offering that, you know, influence and voice, or they can swing in a negative way because I make them mad. And, you know, companies learn this really the hard way. What's the one? Oh, Nestle. Nestle had this big problem on Facebook. You guys remember this a couple of years ago? They were caught by Greenpeace doing some kind of maybe not sustainable practices around palm oil, which is a really contested thing from an environmental perspective anyway. And so Greenpeace posted on their Facebook page. Nestle, wanted to be a modern company, and they put up a Facebook page, and they assigned some of their corporate comms people to monitor it. And so Nestle, has their people, everything's going fine. Greenpeace does a brute force attack on that page, and they get all their members to start posting these little modified Kit Kat pictures with, some nasty little environmental message in the middle of the Kit Kat. And guess what? The corporate comms people don't know what to do. They start deleting messages because this stuff is bad. We don't want this out here. And they start defending the company because that's what their job is. They start arguing, and it's really nasty in the first day. The backlash was huge, huge. The brand damage for them, they probably still haven't overcome some of the issues that came out of that. And all they would have had to have done was train the people, understood what they were doing, train the people, and have dealt with that in a really open way. They wouldn't have had a problem at all. But we've seen it time and time again. Companies that simply go, oops, you're right. That's a practice that we need to stop. We have a 3-year plan to phase that out. Here it is. And, in 3 years, we're going to have that all gone. That's all it would have taken. Simple. Influence. So we start to think of customer experience, then it has to be bigger. Strategy and process, of course. Always have to have strategy. And strategy today is not a binder on a shelf. Strategy is a thing that changes constantly. Information, people, technology, and then access and devices, because your customers want to deal with you here or on their iPad or wherever. So thinking of those systems that I talked about before, you have to start thinking of the CRM system in this context. What I really have to do is listen somewhere, somehow. And I have to take that input, both here and here, and bring all that data together right there when I need to make a decision with the right people, the right content, the right systems, and then I have to think of the response. Now, this is not new, by the way. 1992, I think, IBM, a researcher at IBM published this as the new management model for our generation. And the idea that this was the way that companies should manage their people by this whole sense and respond model. Now, I took that and I've taken it broader, but the truth is this is the new business model. This is what your business needs to build to actually do business today. Because this is an open system and it doesn't focus on what we used to do, and that is make, sell, which is a stability-based, process-based business. This is a way to constantly change your strategy to adapt to whatever you get. Sense and respond. Sounds really simple, not so simple in technology. So, what is it? Well, it's more than sales, marketing, and customer service, certainly, but we need those. It has to include all of those systems that we were talking about, and people too, but systems. And we have to have a way, and I've spent a lot of time with this over the last year, and I did a session actually with Lithium Builds Customer Communities. They have a chief scientist, brilliant guy. We did a session at their conference not long ago about this idea of moving from big data to smart data. And actually, when he and I started talking about this and we whiteboarded this out, it was the first time I didn't have that sort of funny feeling when I talk about big data that is, what am I going to do with this thing? Because I don't even understand it. It's just big. And the point is that if you can take data and you can put it in context with the right people, then it's usable. Then it's actionable, and then it's important. So if I could take social data that I capture about your customer and put that with the transaction data that you already have about your customer, and put that with the right person, the salesperson, the customer support person, the shipping doctor, or whatever, I would be able to do this sense and respond model in an intelligent way. I would have the right data, it would be smart, it would be in context. And then this sense and respond model. So I listen, I respond. So what does this customer experience thing include? Oracle bought a bunch of companies earlier in the year and they rolled that out as a customer experience thing. I'm not sure that's the